Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast.
You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Welcome back. Okay, and we are back. And people have been focusing and wondering for really a couple hundred years about Hasidism, what it's all about. And of course, it's evolved, it's changed from when it began in the 1700s to where it is today. And there was opposition, the Misnagdim, who were opposed to Hasidim. There's still some of them around today too, but some of the things have blurred. We're going to try to get a handle on the project of Hasidism. That's the name of a book by our guest, Rabbi Bezalel Naor, who's written quite a few books on Kabbalah, about Hasidic movement, also about Rav Kook. So welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So let's start at the beginning. The Hasidic movement started in the 1700s. Certainly had a different form then than it had today. Why was it formed by Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, what's called the Besht?
All right. Historians have different versions. There are some who will tell you that it was a populist movement. The Torah scholars formed an elite, and the common man, the Poshet Yid, was left out of the picture. And along comes Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and he has this inclusive philosophy. He includes the simple common folk. That's one interpretation. I go with the reading of Rav Kook, which is that essentially the Baal Shem Tov and his immediate circle were in pursuit of Nevuah. We Jews were bereft of prophecy. It came to an end at the beginning of Bayit Sheni, the Second Temple era. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted to bring it back. That's Rav Kook's reading. That would also be the reading of the Piasetzner Rebbe. You hear a lot about the Piasetzner Rebbe these days, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. By the way, his brother, Rabbi Shaya Shapira, who made it to Eretz Yisrael, was a chassid of Rav Kook. And in fact, he published an early collection of Rav Kook's teachings called Eretz Chayfetz. Today, in Ramat Beit Shemesh, there's a Piasetzner-based medrash, which is run by a grandson of Rabbi Shaya Shapira. It's called Admor Chalutz. So it's interesting that these two men, Rav Kook and also the Piasetzner Rebbe, who of course was martyred in the Holocaust, have the same reading of what the Baal Shem Tov was all about, that he was in pursuit of prophecy.
Now, many people might be aware that Rav Kook himself was certainly somebody who embodied the Hasidic spirit.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Did Rav Kook believe that he had achieved prophecy? He also had a student, the Harav Nazir, Rabbi David Cohen.
The Nazir of Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, who had long hair and didn't drink wine, in keeping with the Nazirite vow. But this is a question that is intriguing. Did these men, Rav Kook and also his Talmud, the Nazir, believe that they themselves had achieved Nevuah? By the way, Avram Yeshua Heschel, Professor Heschel, wrote a very interesting article that the Rambam believed that he had achieved prophecy. Somebody who I think is also in pursuit of prophecy is Rabbi Nachman, who's a great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He's all about Nevuah and Likutei Moharan.
By the way, you mentioned the Nazir of Jerusalem. His son, Rabbi Shai Yosef Cohen, who was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, who I think should have been the chief rabbi of Israel, Great person. He also didn't drink wine, didn't eat meat, except maybe on Shabbat. But he told me he was groomed by his father to be Mashiach. I don't know if you're aware of that. He told me this. Listen, he would have been a great candidate for Mashiach. I was very impressed, and I had a good relationship with him. But he told me his father groomed him to be Mashiach.
He was a dear friend of mine. I did not hear that from him, but I believe you, Zev. I remember I visited him once in a hotel room in Manhattan, and he had a bowl of fruit, and he said, "You eat the grapes. I don't eat grapes." So he did retain that aspect, but
he also was a vegetarian, I believe, except on Shabbos, if I remember correctly.
I think he was a strict vegetarian. Rav Kook would eat meat on Shabbos. The father of Shayashiv, David Cohen, the Nazir, was a strict vegetarian. In fact, he would wear sneakers. He wouldn't wear leather shoes. So he was a very strict vegetarian. But Shayashiv would take a haircut. So that observance had lapsed, but he still retained not eating grapes.
And wine and vegetarianism as well, from what I recall.
Another thing, a Nazir cannot go to the cemetery, but since Shayashiv was a Kohen, so anyway.
It was relevant in that fact.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, so Rav Kook did embody a certain, I think, element of Hasidus. In fact, when I went to give out Shalach Manot to the Israeli army a number of years ago, I saw a fellow with payas and looked like a Hasidic guy and go, "Are you a Chassid?" And he goes, "Yes." And I go, "Who are you a Chassid of?" He goes, "Rav Kook." So.
Yeah, this is a rather recent development that the Chevra from Merkaz Harav, Talmidim of Rav Kook, have long payas. Yeah.
No, and dressed looked like a Chassid. So that's I guess that's a neo-Hasidic movement today, where it blends. I think the Litvaks and the Hasidim, they all blend, because the point that you mentioned before, that either the cooking thought is the Hasidim was meant to achieve prophecy, but the main belief was that the Hasidic movement was rebelling in the sense that there was an elite, and they said every person has a path to God, and you can achieve what you can't achieve through learning, you can also achieve by singing and dancing and joy. And that's the conceptual belief of what Hasidic movement was all about when it first began. There was less stress on learning, more in singing and dancing, which has changed in today's day and age.
Well, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and this is one of my chidushim, one of my novelties, is you find in the Rambam that he wants a strict halacha, which is not tainted by prophecy. He's very emphatic about that. I think it should have been one of his 13 articles of faith, but it's not. But anyway, the Rambam goes to great extremes to produce a halacha which has no prophetic influence. I say that Hasidism is doing the opposite. Hasidism is trying to achieve a nevuah, a prophecy, which is stripped of Torah learning. So the two domains are separate. There's limud Torah, there's the discipline of studying Torah, and then there's prophecy, there's nevuah. So the Rambam is trying to separate them in one way, and the Hasidim are separating it in another way, where you're getting this nevuah, which is separate from limud Torah.
Interesting. It sounds a little bit almost heretical to a certain degree, right?
But, yeah, I based it on a talk of the Kopister Rebbe. He was a Chabad Rebbe. He passed away in 1900, and Rav Kook, as a boy, was exposed to his teachings. Kopister Hasidus. It's a branch of Chabad. It no longer exists, but at a Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the Kopister Rebbe made this point that back in the times of the temple, there was a ceremony called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the celebration of drawing water, which would then be poured on the altar, on the Mizbeach, and he said that there was no Torah there. The Simcha came from, the Nevuah, the prophecy, came from Simcha, but not from Torah, because in Corpus there was the custom that the Rebbe wouldn't say Torah until one of the Hasidim would ask the Rebbe to say Torah. So on that occasion of Simchas Beis HaShoeva, one of the Hasidim asked the Rebbe to say Torah, and he said, "No, I'm not saying Torah, because at Simchas Beis HaShoeva there was no Torah." So then the Hasidim were confused. He said, "But there was Nevuah, because we're told that Yonah ben Amittai, Jonah the prophet, at that ceremony became a prophet. He enjoyed prophecy." So the Rebbe said, "Yeah, there was Nevuah, but it didn't come from Torah. It came from Simcha." When we say "En Shechina Shora Ela Mitoch Simcha," that if you want Hashrat Shechina, if you want the prophetic inspiration, it comes through Simcha. So I think that he really laid down the line there, that Nevuah comes from Simcha, it doesn't come from Torah.
Our guest, Rabbi Bezalel Naor, a lifelong student of Kabbalah and Hasidism. His book is called The Project of Hasidism. Now, the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah of Vilna, was an opponent, a misnagid of the Hasidic movement. So what was that based about? Was that based because they were based on prophecy, or the fact that they were not really involved in learning, were more into joy than learning?
So again, historians will give you different interpretations. One of the things that might have irked the Vilna Gaon was the fact that the Minhagei Ashkenaz, these time-hallowed Ashkenazic minhagim were being thrown under the bus, so to speak, where the Hasidim adopted Nusach Hari or Nusach Sfard, but whatever it is, it's not Nusach Ashkenaz. So based on that alone, you could see that would arouse the ire of the Vilna Gaon. Like, how dare they change the Minhag Avotenu, Biadenu? This is the Minhag of Ashkenaz. So that's one interpretation. But what I try to bring out in the book, and again, you quoted the Kotzker. The Kotzker felt that he is, in some sense, a reincarnation of the Vilna Gaon. It's called the Bor Neshama. And you find this statement, a recurring statement in Kotzk, as preserved by his grandson, the Shemi Shmuel. That's the Sochachav, Reb Shmuel Born Shem Sochachav, that there are many ways to reach God, but all of the ways are fraught with danger, except for the way of the Torah. So, I'm reading this back into the Vilna Gaon, where the Vilna Gaon, too, might have acknowledged, yes, there are many ways to reach God. There are many ways of spirituality, of
Shivim Panim LaTorah, 70 paths to Torah.
But the other ways outside of Torah are fraught with danger. There are pitfalls. And so if we get into the imaginative faculty, the koach medameh, which is conducive to prophecy, we might go astray. So let's stay with the true and tested path of Torah, of Limud Torah. Let's stay in the Beit Midrash. Let's learn Gemara, because that's true and tested. This other way of Nevuah, which I don't think the Vilna Gaon was denying. It's a valid path, but it's dangerous, and he felt that at that time and in that place that Klal Yisrael were not ready for this.
But how would the average person reach prophecy? You can say somebody in the category of the Rebbe Yisrael, Baal Shem Tov, with a great Hasidic mass, but to expect thousands of people to try to achieve prophecy seems hard to comprehend.
Yeah, this is one of the points that I do deal with in the book. And I think there's a machloket between two scholars. One is Binyamin Brown, and the other is a dear friend of mine, Zvi Leshem. Zvi Leshem did his doctoral dissertation on the Piaseczner Rebbe. That's Kolonim Kalnish Shapira.
Of Warsaw.
Yeah. The Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. And Brown has a different reading of the Hasidic movement. Leshem is reading it through the lens of the Piaseczner, which, as I said, is similar to Rav Kook, that it's all about Nevuah, it's about prophecy. Benjamin Brown is very circumspect. He thinks that if it was about Nevuah, that would have been reserved for the Rebbes, for the Tzaddikim,
For the elite, right.
not for the Hamon Am. So this is an interesting point of contention.
Now let's get back to the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon and his disciples, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, and he was especially opposed to the Baal Tanya, to the Lubavitch version of Hasidus. Lubavitch was different than the rest of the Hasidim because they were more intellectual from the get-go.
All right, so that's a misnomer. It doesn't become Lubavitch until the days of the Mittler Rebbe. That's Reb Dov Ber Shnei Ori, the son of the Baal Tanya. The Baal Tanya himself starts out in Lyozhna, and then he goes to Ladi. So let's leave Lubavitch out of it. But Chabad, it was Chabad. Those two were sparring partners, the Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tam Shneur Zalman of Liadi. But something I heard from my teacher, Rav Soloveitchik, and you mentioned Rav Soloveitchik, Zev. I heard this from the Rav on many occasions, that it's interesting when it comes to halacha and also tefillah. He found many times that the Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe actually are on the same page. So they had ideological differences, but
Pretty serious ones.
Yeah. But that was the finding of Rav Soloveitchik, that when it came to how to paskin a halacha, or even in the davening, he found that many times they were on the same page.
Because I was led to believe, and I heard this, that the language that the Vilna Gaon used about the Baal Tanya used the word asol l'staklu of Russia. It's forbidden to look at the face of an evil person. So it was very personal.
I don't know. I haven't come.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
My father must have told me that. He heard it from good sources.
There is a story, and again, there are different versions, but I'll give you Rabbi Soloveitchik's version. There was a time that the Baal Tanya and his Rebbe, that's Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Hardok and Vitebsk, the Baal Prioritz, he later made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, settled in Tiberia. The two of them went to visit the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon, despite all the pressure that was brought to bear upon him by the Kehillah in Vilna, would not countenance them. He would not receive them. And there's different versions. Some say that the Vilna Gaon's mother forbade him from receiving them, and he snuck out the back door and left Vilna till they had gone. But there's another version that he looked through the keyhole and he saw the Hadras Panim, the beautiful faces of these two men, the Menachem Mendel Vitebsk and his student Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And he was so overcome by the Hadras Panim, the light beams that were coming off their faces, that he decided that it would be wise not to enter into discussion with them. And that's when he ran away.
Okay. Hey, that sounds like a Hasidic story, the second one that you mentioned.
Well, Rabbi Soloveitchik had a lot of Chabad influence in his upbringing. He would
Well, he
always,
was very close with the Lubavitcher Rebbe here. In fact, from what I was told by Rabbi Chaim Dalfin, I believe, is that the Lubavitcher Rebbe helped him get the position at Yeshiva University.
yeah, but the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Yosef Yitzhak, that's true. That is true. Rav Soloveitchik's father, Moshe Soloveitchik, had been the Rosh Yeshiva, and then he was Nifter, and it seems there were Balabatim who did not want his son to succeed in that position, and somebody who helped him to get the position was Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson. That's true. But Rav Soloveitchik's connection to Chabad went back to his youth. He grew up in Chaslavich, which was a town of Lubavitcher Hasidim. His father, Moshe Soloveitchik, was the Rav. That was a Misnagid, and that's an interesting phenomenon. But he would always tell the story of his Melamed, this Lubavitcher Chassid who taught him as a boy, who had a profound influence on him. And throughout his life, Rav Soloveitchik continued to study Tanya and the Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe.
Did he ever go to the Farbrengens of the Lubavitcher Rebbe?
So there is that historic video in 1980, which was the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe from 1950 to 1980, where Rav Soloveitchik made a guest appearance. You can see the video of that, yeah.
Our guest is Rabbi Bezalel Naor. He's a lifelong student of Kabbalah and Hasidism. His book is called The Project of Hasidism. Now, Yeshiva University is considered the citadel of Litvaks, of intellectualism. So I know a number of years ago they brought in Rabbi Moshe Weinberger. What they wanted to do is to bring in the Hasidic flavor, because you have a lot of the yeshivas are very intellectual, but they're lacking that spiritual component that Hasidism bring. They try to marry that to bring that into it. So let's look at the fact that Hasidism is on the rise. I think it's affected even the Litvak or the Misnagdisha world.
I talk about that's in the book.
You're about the Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel meeting with the Rav.
Well, more than that, I found documentation that Heschel almost became faculty at Yeshiva University. And I speculated what would have come out of that. It would have been quite amazing, because you'd have the Rav and the Rebbe. Heschel, as you know, came from a very distinguished Hasidic lineage, descended from the great Rebbes, the great Tzaddikim. And eventually, he became faculty at Jewish
Theological Seminary, right?
But it was looking for a time that he would be faculty at Yeshiva University, and I speculated that something wonderful might have come out of that, because there's something beautiful about the marriage of both of those traditions. That's what Rav Kook is trying to do, by the way. He verbalizes it in his writings, in the Igrot, in the letters, where he says how beautiful it would be if we could combine the combination of the Talmidei Hagra with the Talmidei Habesh. A student of Rav Kook, who I think was aiming for that, was Rav Yitzchak Hutner. I saw Rav Yitzchak Hutner once in my life. It was Chol Moed Sukkot. He was sitting in the Sukkah at Chaim Berlin, and he was wearing a spodek, the way the Gerers do. He was wearing this high fur hat, which was not typical for Litvish Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Ruderman, they were not wearing fur hats.
Right, not spuddocks, not streimels, right?
So Rav Hutner, I think, imbibed that from his mentor, Rav Kook. to try to achieve a synthesis of these two glorious traditions of the Hasidim and Misnagdim. And as you said, yes, Rav Moshe Weinberg was brought in as a mashpia.
To bring more of a Hasidic flavor to Yeshiva University.
Yeah, because Brisk, as it's called, on its own,
very cerebral.
Very cerebral. It's wonderful for the intellect, but it doesn't do too much for the emotions. And then Hasidism, at least some forms of Hasidism, do for emotions, but they leave something to be desired in the intellectual department. Chabad, Chochmah Binah Dat, is an attempt to create a more intellectual, a more Litvish form of Hasidism.
Absolutely the case. Father, can you talk about the connection I'm hearing for the first time between Rav Hutner and Rav Kook?
Yeah. All right. Well, I have this from so many different sources. First of all, I kind of want to correct my earlier statement. One of my teachers was Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, who was a younger brother of Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, and he succeeded his brother as Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. He had been taught by Rav Yitzchak Hutner back in Warsaw. The way it came about was the father, Moshe Soloveitchik, went to New York to become Rosh Yeshiva of Yitzchak Hutner, and the Rebbitzin and the younger children were left behind in Warsaw. The older son was already studying in Berlin, but Aaron had Rav Yitzchak Hutner as his private melamed, so he knew Rav Hutner very well. And Rav Aaron once corrected me. He said, "Don't say that Rav Hutner was a Talmud of Rav Kook. He was a Slobodka Talmud." So he was Rav Hutner was never a Talmid Min Minyan in Merkaz Harav, but he did have a very strong connection, a shaykhus to Rav Kook, and the way it came about was Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, my teacher, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, the son of the chief rabbi, was married to Chava Leah Hutner, who was a cousin of Rav Yitzchak Hutner. Not through Hutner, through Segal. It's kind of complicated. People think, because his name is Hutner and her maiden name was Hutner, but it's a little more complicated. But that provided an a direct line to Rav Kook through his daughter-in-law.
And they had a relationship?
Excuse me?
Did Rav Kook and Rav Hutner have a relationship?
Yeah, so it was very close. But again, Rav Hutner was not enrolled in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, but through the family connection, which was much more intimate, much closer, because he was a cousin to Rav Kook's daughter-in-law, Chava Leah Hutner, who married Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. So he had a very strong connection. And there is this statement where he told Rav Moshe Tzvi Neria that he said, 50% of my existence, like 50% of my existence is Rav Kook. So it's a strong influence.
Very strong influence. Now, there is a terminology that people talk about today, the Hasidification of orthodoxy, that things are becoming changing, where Hasidism is on the rise, both in Israel and in here. And if you look at even the Haredi community, you have more Hasidim than Yeshivish people. Let's look at that Hasidification, how it's really changing the face of orthodoxy.
It's been going on for a long time. There's a cross-pollination. It goes in both directions, Zev. One direction is that Hasidim take in Litvish Rosh Yeshivas who expose them to the Litvish or even Brisker Der Chalil.
We have Sovereign Hasidim learning in Lakewood, right?
Yeah, that's an old. Reb Aaron Kotler allowed that. Yeah, and there are Misnagdim that are mad at Reb Aaron Kotler to this day for allowing Hasidim into Lakewood. They felt it was a corrupting influence. And then it goes the other way, where there's Nagina, there's Rikud, there's this Simcha, this Chedvat Chaim, the Shwa David, that the Hasidim bring to the Litvish world. So it's going both ways. But what I'm interested in is to get back to the core phenomenon of Hasidism, which is not about the fur hats and the levush. I remember many years ago, I had an interesting conversation with Rav Nachman Bolman. And I told him that the Hasidim, I was talking specifically about the Satmar Hasidim. I said they preserve the shalshelis, they preserve that chain of tradition. Shalshelis means a chain because they dress exactly the way they did in Europe. And Rav Bolman was very sharp, if you knew him. He cut me off and he said, they don't have the shalshelis, they have the shell.
That's a sharp word. It means they're not really the real chain, but it's just the shell.
It's very easy to put on a kapota and a gartel and a streimel. It's much harder to get into what I call the core phenomenon of Hasidism.
So are today people more interested in Hasidism?
Well, as you said, Zev, there's this phenomenon of neo-Hasidism. There is a rebirth. Look, Breslov, which was on the verge of extinction, now they tell me in Uman there could be 50,000.
Had a record year this year, from what I heard.
Rav Nachman predicted. He said there'll come a day when my Hasidus will be almost extinct. There'll be like 3 or 4 Breslov Hasidim. Wow, did that make a comeback? Chabad is still going strong.
Well, I think they're the glue that holds the Orthodox world together is Chabad. Wherever you go around the world, you need kosher food, you need a minyan. Chabad is there.
Look, I'm not going to minimize Chabad. Again, there are different gradations of Chabad. There's Chabad light, and then there are people who are really studying the Hasidus, the Tanya and the Terer and the Kutei Terer, and that's much harder. Again, it's easy to put on a levush. It's much harder to get into the spirituality. And Piasetzner is going strong. So there are these revivalist movements. And I hope as time goes on, we'll get closer and closer to the core phenomenon of what the Baal Shem Tov was all about. That would be wonderful.
You talking the prophetic version or the one serve God with joy? Which one you're looking at?
It's the same thing because the Simcha is the conduit.
To get the prophetic vision. Okay.
Simcha.
Anyway, Rabbi Bezalel Naor, the book is called The Project of Hasidism. Thank you for joining us. What's your next book going to be about?
It's going to be on something very, very traditional, on the Parshiot and the Moadim. I have these Chidushei Torah that have amassed over the past 40 years, and
wow.
We're trying to massage them into shape now, and hopefully we'll come out with 2 volumes.
But from a Hasidic perspective or the Litvish perspective?
I'm like Rav Kook. I'm beyond this spartification.
Anyway, Rabbi Naor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Zev. And bracha v'atzlacha.
Mechaim Lamar.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.